I feel like a lot of us really don't know the difference, a significant difference between healing from your pain and moving on from your pain. And there's a fine line between the two. And most people would say that, well, healing and moving on is the same thing. You're just basically, either way, you're over it. You're over the pain that has been caused. You're over the trauma that you've gone through. You're over whatever happened to you. You're just simply over it. And in today's society, it's such a convenience to just be over something, to simply just find ways to forget, because forgetting is such a convenient thing. And with today's technology and with our access to all kinds of things, we are able to just erase whatever happens to us. We can erase whatever happens to us. We can just take it from our psyche, or so we think. But that's not the case. And that's where understanding the difference between healing and moving on comes into play. The difference between healing and moving on is very simple. To understand the two is to understand the fine line between necessity, things that are necessary, and things that are convenient. A lot of us tend to lean towards things that are convenient because convenience provides a sense of comfort. That's where moving on comes into play. And that's the difference between healing and moving on. First off, healing, one of the first steps to truly healing from pain is to understand acknowledgement. You have to acknowledge what happened. Forgetting about what happened, it's easy. That's why it's convenient. But here's the thing about just forgetting it. When you forget something, or when you try to forget something, all you're really doing is just burying a much necessary emotion. You're burying something that needs to be acknowledged, that needs to be accepted. You're burying it deep down inside. You're not really facing it. You're not facing your problems. A lot of us have a hard time facing our problems. We have a hard time facing reality. That's why there's so many easy escapes from reality these days that can take our minds off of the pain, that can take our minds off of our past, things that we've suppressed, things that we were able to suppress with all of the access that we have. It's just so easy for us. Easy and convenient. It's a sense of comfort. It makes you comfortable. Forgetting something makes you comfortable. Acknowledging something a lot of times makes us uncomfortable. And here's where healing is usually a very hard thing to do. First of all, to heal, you have to assess the situation. You have to ask yourself what happened. You have to ask yourself, why did this happen? What, when, and why? I said this in one of my other videos. Some of the three most important W's are what, when, and why. When you figure out those three W's, you can figure out the how. Once you figure out what happened, once you figure out when it started, once you figure out why it happened, now you can figure out, how do I heal from this? How do I truly grow? Because that's what healing is. Healing is a sense of growth. All the emotions that you go through from a painful situation, whether it be sadness, depression, anger, these are all a healing process. Your depression is a healing process. Now let's look at moving on. Let's look at the conveniences of moving on. How easy is it to move on from something? Well, for one thing, all you got to do is find a distraction. And there's nothing wrong with finding distractions. Sometimes distractions are good. But when your distraction becomes your new reality, that's where you're blurring the lines. Because you're so caught up in your distractions, you're so caught up in forgetting that you forget how to acknowledge. Because to be so focused on forgetting something is to just ignore the acknowledgement that needs to be made. Ignoring the fact that one day you're going to have to assess the situation. You're going to have to find an understanding. You have to understand. This is where the what, when, and whys. When you try so hard to forget things, you're suppressing things. You're suppressing a demon that you should be fighting, that you should be confronting. You're just burying it. You're burying pain. You're burying your emotions. You're burying a situation. You're burying the situation. You're burying the source of the problem. And to bury something, understand this: burying something is it. You're just in a very strange way. When you bury something, you're planting a seed. It's just like planting a seed. But here's the thing about planting a seed. When you plant a seed, guess what? Eventually that seed is going to grow into something. Because as you're burying something, guess what? You're still growing. Every day you get older, you're still evolving. You're still growing. And as you grow, that thing that you buried is going to grow as well. And you have to be careful because it could grow into something that you don't like. It's going to grow into something that other people around you aren't going to like. Burying pain, burying your sadness, burying the bad things that someone has done to you, burying that deep down inside and just covering it with distraction after distraction. Guess what? That pain is going to grow into anger. That anger is going to grow into hatred. That anger is going to grow into resentment. That anger is going to create a large chip on your shoulder to the point where one day you look in the mirror and you become a person that you don't even recognize because you were so focused on moving on. You were just so focused on forgetting. You were so focused on ignoring the problem that the problem grew within you. Even if it was forgotten about by everyone else, guess what? It's still in here. It's still in your heart. It's still in your gut. It's still in your mind, and it's still a part of your soul. It's growing now. Every day it's growing to eventually it's going to blossom into something that you might not like. So how do you bury a situation? How do you ignore and forget the situation? Well, for one thing, not taking accountability, accountability that everything that happens to us in a very strange way, it's in somewhat shape or form our fault. We are all responsible for the things that happen to us one way or another. Bad things happen, bad situations. You have a fallout with a friend. You have to understand and assess the situation and take accountability. Okay, they may have did something wrong, but what did I do wrong? What happened here? How were we both at fault? Because at the end of the day, both parties are at fault. You are in some way, shape, or form at fault in some way for the things that happen. This happened for multiple reasons. And this is where assessing the situation comes into play. It obviously takes two to tango in these situations. So understanding is what it's about. It's about understanding, finding an understanding of why it happened. Now we're at the level of why. You've gone to the what. The what is the easy part. You obviously know what happened. You know when it started. Now you have to understand why. Why did all these incidences, why did this situation transpire? How did it turn into this? How did this happen to me? Why did it happen to me? Why did I allow it to happen to me? Healing. This is the healing side right now that we're talking about, as opposed to the moving on side. Not understanding why, not truly, like, that's the final step. If you ignore the final step, you're going to find yourself slowly leading into moving on because you're disregarding why it happened. You're disregarding how any of this in a lot of ways is on you as well as the other side of the party, the other side of the occurrence, the other thing that caused this occurrence to happen. But a big part of that occurrence was you as well, because you are a part of this. You are a part of your bad situation. Therefore, in somewhat shape or form, this is on you. And at the end of the day, it's going to be on you because that's going to determine how fast or how slow you truly heal from this. Understand that. Also understand that through pain comes emotion. Emotions, changing of emotions, it's part of a healing process. I don't think people understand the importance of a healed soul and truly like understanding and acknowledging that bad things are going to happen to us. If you go through life believing that bad things are never going to happen to you, you're going to live a very rough life. And that's why a lot of people find convenience in moving on because they just they constantly tell themselves, well, it'll never happen again. I will never get hurt again. I will never be taken advantage of again. I will never have this happen to me again. I always say there are two words in English vocab that I don't like: never and can't. Because it's so convenient to say both words. It's so convenient to say, I can't do something. It's so convenient to say, it'll never happen again. That's like trying to predict the future. And we all know how that turns out when you try to predict the future. It never pans out well because all the things you try to prevent from happening, they happen 10 times more. They happen 10 times worse. It gets worse. The more we try to prevent things from happening that are naturally going to happen, especially things that naturally happen. You know, you may prevent aging. You may prevent, we do things to prevent getting older. We do things to prevent necessary parts of life. That's like preventing evolution. If you're trying to prevent human evolution, what are you doing? You're preventing time. You're trying to stop time. At the end of the day, time is not on any of our sides. What you do with the time that's given to you is up to you. So you can either take this time to mask the pain, to forget the pain, to find distractions for the pain, or you can take the time to assess, ask why, and acknowledge what, when, and why. The three most important ingredients to healing. Because the final step is how. How do I recover? How do I get over the pain? These are important questions that you need to ask yourself. I'm going to go through a list. There's two sides in two lists. There's a list of healing and there's a list of moving on. I'm going to go through the necessary steps of healing. And I'm also going to go through the three conveniences of moving on. I'm going to go back and forth from one to the other. And keep in mind that this is a list that I created. It's nothing that the statistics show or anything that, you know, that I've read on Google. It's just things that I have learned through my journey. And I personally feel that they can help as well. So I'm going to go through them. And I'm going to list one for healing. I'm going to list one for moving on. So I'm going to jump back and forth. The first step to healing, like I said before, is assessing what happened. I was always trained to assess situations, assess the situation, assess what happened, and assess what went wrong. That's the first step to healing. Now let's look at, on the opposite side, the first convenience to moving on. One of the first and earliest conveniences for moving on is finding a distraction, simply for the convenience of not having to think about what happened. You notice what I did there? Steps and conveniences. There's steps to healing. There's conveniences to moving on. Now, this convenience may sound good. It sounds good in the early stages, but it's not a necessity. This is a convenience. And a lot of things mean very little when they're convenient. You're finding a distraction so you don't have to think about everything that's happened to you. Therefore, you don't have to go through the necessary steps of assessing the situation. Next step for healing is finding a clear understanding for why it happened. You've already answered the question of what happened. You understand that. Now the next step is about finding an understanding of why things happen. Because once you find an understanding as to why, now you can start acknowledging it. You can start acknowledging the feelings that are going to come from this pain that you're going through, from this trauma that you've experienced, from this situation, from what has happened to you. You know what? Now you have to understand why. I know I skipped past the when. Usually the when a lot of times come first, because you usually understanding what happened is to really understand when it started. That's usually the next step. You know when it started. So those kind of go hand in hand. So now that next step, we've come across that, finding a clear understanding about why it happened and acknowledging it. Now let's look at the other side of that line. And we're going to jump to the second convenience of moving on. Excuse me. The second step to moving on is basically after you found the distraction and you found your first convenience, the second step is you're conditioning your mind to simply forget about what happened. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize when they constantly find distractions, is they are accidentally, unintentionally conditioning their mind to forget about this bad situation, to forget about what's happened. And it's going to feel like you're erasing it. You're erasing what happened. You're burying it. Erasing it to me is just another word for burying. You're burying what happened. You're seeking a sense of comfort because you want to be comfortable in your pain. Let me tell you something. You cannot be comfortable while you're in pain. And to be in pain is to heal. So if you're trying to heal, being comfortable is not going to happen. You're not going to be comfortable at first. You're going to go through a wave of emotions. It doesn't matter what happened. If it's bad enough for you to go through this, if it's bad enough for you to go through and find a distraction, you're going to have to eventually face the pain, eventually face yourself, and eventually face what happened. So if you know you have to face it, you might as well just face it head on and understand. Find the understanding. Find that understanding and you're going to truly be able to get why it happened. Now you can jump into the how. How do I fix it? How do I grow from this? So now let's look at the final step. I said there were 3 steps. The final step of healing to me is acknowledging all the emotions that you now know you're going to go through, that you probably already have been going through while you've been assessing your situation. Acknowledgement is so important when it comes to healing, because to acknowledge is to face the reality that you're going to go through the motions. You're going to go through that pain. You're going to go through all of these. There's going to be moments where you're angry. There's going to be moments where you feel okay. There's going to be good days. There's going to be bad days. This is a part of life, people. A part of life is you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. But going through all of these emotions and acknowledging them, now you can get to understanding that all of these steps is part of your healing journey. This is a necessary journey that you're going to have to take in order to truly heal from this and to overcome and to grow. Understanding that this journey will make you a better person. It will make you into something better than what you were before it ever happened. And it's going to feel so good that you might look back at that situation and you might thank yourself for going through it. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? Thank you for allowing myself to go through this and to truly heal from it. Now that I've healed, my soul feels better. I have grown into something that was better than what I was yesterday. That's the importance of acknowledgement. Now let's look at the flip side of that coin. Now we're going to get to the final convenience of moving on. You found your distraction. You were unaware that you're conditioning yourself to forget about what happened. But a little bit of what happened is still there. But here's the thing about distractions. Distractions take away your ability to take accountability. I always said it. I said it before a few minutes ago that we are all in some way, shape, or form responsible for the things that happen to us. Now, here's where the last convenience of moving on comes into play. Because you realize that you're like, you know what? I can't forget. I can't forget everything. But you know what I can do? I can focus on how it wasn't my fault. I can focus on how it wasn't entirely my fault. And when not entirely your fault starts turning into it was all their fault. It's society's fault that I'm like this. It's the world's fault. It's that other person's fault. I didn't do anything wrong. Folks, I have heard people say this. I've literally heard people say this at the end of arguments and altercations. Oh, I haven't done anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong, so I have nothing to apologize to that person for. I've heard friends say that. Needless to say, a lot of those friends are ex-friends now, because personally, I cannot be around a person that cannot take accountability. And you shouldn't either, because those are bad influences for you, especially if you're on a healing journey. You have to surround yourself with people that are going to be tough on you. You have to surround yourself with that positive energy, but also that reinforcing energy that whoever you're around, they're not always going to be super nice. They're going to force you to confront this. Hey, man, you have to acknowledge what happened. You have to accept what happened. You have to heal from this. Always tell people, surround yourself with positive energy, but also surround yourself with reinforcing energy. Surround yourself with the type of people that are not afraid to be tough on you when they need to be. Because those people, those friends that are tough on you, guess what? They're going to be your best friends in the long run. They're going to help you in the long run. So that convenience, that final convenience, if you don't have that type of energy around you, if you don't have that type of energy in here, then you're not going to be able to take accountability. You're not going to be able to assess the situation. You're just going to keep focusing on distraction after distraction, mentally conditioning yourself to bury the pain, to bury what happened, to plant that seed of anger, planting that seed of resentment that you don't even know about until one day it grows so much that you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't recognize who you are. And to anyone, we've all been there. We've all been at points in our lives where we don't know who we are. And that can be frightening. And now you're living your life with a fear. You're afraid. You're constantly afraid of going back and assessing. Facing your fear. Facing your fear, that's an accomplishment. And if you have no accomplishments in your life, what are you really doing? What are you living for? So ignore the convenience for a while. Yes, you're going to come to a point in your life where you seek a level of comfort. You're going to find a level of comfort. You're going to be comfortably content one day. But in order to be comfortably content, you have to be comfortably in pain. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And when you do that, that's when you can truly start healing and start growing. Folks, just remember at the end of the day, healing is everything and growth is everything. And as long as you're working your ass off to get to those points, as long as you're working your ass off to be a better person than you were yesterday, which I feel we should all be striving to do, as long as you're trying. Success doesn't happen overnight. Healing doesn't happen overnight. But as long as you're trying and you're taking the necessary steps and you're acknowledging the emotions that you're going to go through, you're going to be okay. You will. And with that, folks, I will say once again, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Also, if you are new to my channel, do not be a stranger. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share. And if nobody else tells you, I'll tell you. I love you, and I'm proud of you. Keep it up.